All right, today's lesson is on solving equations by multiplying or dividing. Our guiding question, how are equations solved using multiplication or division? Remember, yesterday we learned that equations have equal signs. That was kind of a big thing because one side of the equation has to be the same as the other side of the equation. Today we have a new property of equality that we're going to be using called the division property of equality. The division property of equality says that we can maintain equality by dividing both sides of an equation by the same number. So for example, in 4 times 3 equals 12, if we take 4 times 3 and divide it by 2, and take 12 and divide it by 2, we can maintain equality by dividing both sides of the equation by the same thing. You know if you have to use division if you have a number called a coefficient being multiplied by a variable. For example, if 3 were being multiplied by x to equal 12, we would have to use division to separate the 3 and the x, which we'll see in the following examples. In our first example, 6x equals 48, we are going to solve for the variable x. We know that 6 and x are written right next to one another, which means 6 and x are being multiplied together to equal 48. Now, many of you will be tempted to just solve this mentally, which is fine if you want to come up with your estimate. So, for our estimate, if a number times 6 is going to equal 48, I know that that number should be 8. But when we solve it in an equation, we need to use a specific process. So first we draw a line to divide our equation into two parts. Next, since 6 and x are being multiplied, the opposite is division. We're going to use a fraction bar to show the division, divided by 6. Our division property of equality says we must treat both sides of the equation the same to maintain equality. So we're going to divide both sides by 6. Now, if this is a fraction, 6 divided by 6 is equal to 1. Therefore, 6 and 6 can be crossed off. Notice the crossing off or the slash looks like a 1 to equal 1x equals, over on this side, 48 divided by 6 I know is equal to 8. So now we have our equation solved, or at least we think so. 1 and x written right next to one another means 1 times x. And we know that anything times 1 is always equal to itself. So we can actually rewrite our solution without the 1, and therefore x is equal to 8. Now, remember, we want to make sure that we check by substituting the value we have for the variable back into the equation. So we found that x is equal to 8. So we're going to substitute. 6 times 8 equals 48. And if they are, in fact, equal, we know we have the solution. In our next example, we have a negative 9 equal to 45. When negative 9 and y are right next to one another, I know they're being multiplied, and that is going to produce a product of 45. When negative 9 and y are being multiplied, I'm going to use the division property of equality to undo that multiplication. I'm going to divide by negative 9 on both sides. And I want to use a negative 9 because a negative divided by a negative will produce a positive, and a 9 divided by a 9 will equal 1. Now, in the last example, we learned that when you have a numerator and a denominator that are the same, they will equal 1. We also learned that a 1y means 1 times y, which is the same as y. So we can cross off our negative 9s to equal 1, which is going to leave us with a y. On the other side, we have a 45 divided by a negative 9, so we have a positive divided by a negative, which is equal to a negative. So I know my answer is going to be negative, and 45 divided by 9 is equal to 5, so my solution should be y equals negative 5. Now, we could do a quick check. Substitute negative 5 in for y, so we have a negative 9 times a negative 5 equals 45. We know a negative divided by a negative equals a positive. 9 times 5 is 45. So 45 equals 45, and the solution works. Our new property of equality is called the multiplication property of equality. It means that you can multiply both sides of an equation by the same number, and the statement will still be true. In other words, if you have an equation like 2 times 3 is equal to 6, if you multiply both sides of the equation by the same value, in this case multiplied by 4, you will still maintain balance. 24 is equal to 24. You know if you have to use multiplication, or the multiplication property of equality, if the variable, this let's say is x, is being divided by an integer. In this case, x is being divided by negative 4, and we would use the property of multiplication, the multiplication property of equality to solve this equation, which we'll see in the next example. So, in our next example, we have the variable b written in a fraction over negative 4, and that is equal to 5. Remember, a fraction is the same as a division problem. So therefore, b and negative 4 are being divided. I'm going to rewrite it just so I have some more space. Now, I show the multiplication property of equality by multiplying this fraction by a negative 4, and I'm going to multiply over here by a negative 4. Oop, I forgot to draw my line to show the equality. Now, I'm multiplying by a negative 4. Notice that the negative 4 that I multiplied by is in the numerator. The other negative 4 is in the denominator. So again, a negative 4 in the numerator and a negative 4 in the denominator, when you're multiplying, will equal 1. So these will cancel each other out. There's that slash that looks like a 1. That's going to leave me with a 1b, which is the same as 1. We saw that in the last examples. On this side, 5 times negative 4, I know that a positive times a negative equals a negative. So this will equal a negative 20. So my solution, b is equal to negative 20. Now again, we're going to check it to make sure we have the correct solution. We substitute our negative 20 into the equation. Negative 20 over negative 4 is equal to 5. I know that a negative divided by a negative is a positive. 20 divided by 4 is equal to 5. And my solution checks out. In our next example, we have the variable c being divided by negative 3 to equal 5. This c and negative 3 written as a fraction lets me know that they are being divided. Therefore, I'm going to use the multiplication property of equality and multiply by negative 3 on both sides. We just to remind you that a negative 3 divided by a negative 3 will equal 1. So we can use that slash or that 1 to cancel those out. That's going to leave you with a C. On the other side, we have a positive times a negative, which is equal to a negative. 5 times 3 is equal to 15. So our solution should be negative 15. We can check it by substituting our negative 15 into the equation. Negative 15 divided by a negative 3 should equal 5. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 15 divided by 3 is 5. And again, our solution checks out. Next example. To go on a school trip, Helen has raised $670, which is 1/4 of the amount she needs. What is the total amount needed? So we want to figure out how much she has to earn in total. We know that she has earned $670 so far. We know that that is 1/4 of the total she has to earn. Now I'm using a T for total, but you could use any variable. Now, this left-hand side, 1/4 T, could also be written as 1T over 4 or T over 4. All of those are the same. So, if I rewrite my equation down here, again, T and 4 are written in a division problem. The opposite of division is multiplication, so I can use the multiplication property of equality to cancel these out. 4 divided by 4 is going to equal 1. The 1 does not need to be written, so that's going to leave me with my variable T. On the right-hand side, I've got 670 times 4. I'm going to do my math right here. 4 times 0 is 0. 4 times 7 is 28. Carry the 2. 4 times 6 is 24, plus 2 more is 26. So T is equal to $2,680, which is the total amount she has to earn to be able to go on the school trip. Now, checking it, I'm kind of running out of room here. I'm going to put it right here. If I check it, I'm going to take my variable T, which is equal to 2,680, and I'm going to divide it by 4 to ensure that it's equal to 670. This would be a great time to use a calculator. 2,680 divided by 4 is actually equal to 670. So, our equation, or our solution, checks out. All right, the last slide, or the last part of your notes. Answer the guiding question at the bottom of your notes. How are equations solved using multiplication and division? Your homework assignment that will be given to you tomorrow during class is Lesson 1-8, Practice B worksheet. Again, we'll be doing that in class on Wednesday.